started thinking about this film originally in 2012 after a story that I had read about a woman named Savita Halappanavar who died in Ireland after being denied a life-saving abortion. And I became really obsessed with reading about what is insensitively coined abortion tourism. These long, distressing journeys that people take all over the world to access very essential abortion care. And I think I'm really compelled to tell stories about kind of painful journeys that people go through that you haven't seen on screen. I found an article about New York that was all about how New York is the abortion capital of the United States, and it's a place where you can get the care that you need. And I set it in Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania is one of 37 states that has parental consent laws that require teenagers to ask their parents or go see a judge if they need an abortion. I was exploring the film through the point of view of a teenager. I felt like it was realistic that she could take this trip from Pennsylvania to New York.
I was just going about my everyday life, working in a grocery store and playing in a band and living with like 4 roommates. And just one day I get an email, asking me to try out for this part. And it was just super bizarre and came as a total surprise to me. And at first I immediately declined, just thought to myself, well, I'm not an actor. And I just thought it was something I wasn't capable of. And it was also like a terrifying opportunity because of the fact that it was something so new and so big. I chatted with Scott, Eliza's partner, a bit, and he told me like, well, you're a performer and you can totally do it. And he convinced me to Skype with Eliza, and I talked with her and I found her really easy to get along with, and I liked her ideas. And then I read the script, and I became further invested into the story. I really loved just how grounded all the characters felt and how real it felt. And I just had a feeling that it was going to be a very powerful story, and that it was just going to be the type of project that would be really humbling to work on.
I met with Kelly Chapman, who worked at Choices Clinic in Queens. And together we began to try and figure out a way to marry what she does as a social worker, how she behaves in the office, with the style of the script. She was a real sounding board for me while I was writing the script. I kept on calling her and asking her questions. And while I was writing the script, I began to sort of hear her voice and the character on the page. And I knew that it was important to cast her in the end because I had essentially accidentally written the role for her. And I felt that it would create a really safe space for Sidney, a first-time actor, to perform the scene. There's something about this vulnerable first-time actor being, in the care of a real social worker that allowed for a certain level of emotional vulnerability. I wanted the pivotal scene of the film, and Never Rarely, Sometimes Always, to be truly authentic. It was important to me to consult with Planned Parenthood and other clinics while writing the script. And I sat with a lot of social workers and began to try and understand as a writer what their job is and how they would engage with somebody who was a minor traveling from out of state. They took me through the process, the questionnaire form, and that's where I found the intimate partner violence section, in which a social worker would try and assess whether or not the person who was in their office was safe or not.
I was working at an abortion clinic in Queens when Eliza was doing research She wanted specifically to talk about not just my experience as a counselor, an abortion counselor, but specifically, wanted to hear some stories about women and girls who had traveled. And of course, there were a lot of stories.
It was a really important part of the story for me because Autumn as a character is traveling through such an unsafe landscape. There's no place in her world that's completely safe until she arrives in the office of the social worker.
Hi, Autumn. I'm Kelly. I'm your counselor. How are you doing?
Okay.
I want to spend a few minutes talking with you about your relationships, okay? Because they can affect your health. Did you know that? No? All right. So I'm going to ask you some questions. They can be really personal, and all you have to do is answer either never, rarely, sometimes, or always. It's kind of like multiple choice, but it's not a test.
Okay.
Okay? In the past year, your partner has refused to wear a condom. Never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Sometimes.
Okay. And your partner messes with your birth control or tries to get you pregnant when you don't want to be. Never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Never.
Okay. Your partner has threatened or frightened you. Never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Why are you asking me this?
I want to make sure that you're safe. Your partner's threatened or frightened you. Never, rarely, sometimes, always.
Rarely.
Okay. Your partner has hit you, slapped you, or physically hurt you. Never, rarely, sometimes, always. Has your partner ever hit you, slapped you, or physically hurt you? Is someone hurting you? It's okay. It's just a couple more questions, all right? Your partner has made you have sex when you didn't want to. Never, rarely, sometimes, always. It's okay. I want to make sure you're safe, and I want to help you if I can. I have just one more question for you, okay, Autumn? Has anyone forced you into a sexual act ever in your lifetime, yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to tell me about it?
No.
It's okay. I'm going to give you my number, and you can call me. We don't have to talk about it today, but you can call me if you need to talk or if you need some help, okay? Do you have any questions for me?
Is it the procedure? Is it going to be painful?
It's going to be a little uncomfortable. Have you ever had a GYN exam before?
No.
Okay. It's going to be in an operating room. There's going to be a doctor. There's going to be a nurse. There's going to be a medical assistant. I can be there with you if you want me to be. Would you like me to go with you?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, so it's kind of like having a GYN exam today. They're going to put a speculum in the vagina. They're going to put laminaria into the cervix, and that's what's going to help the cervix open overnight. All right, so it's gonna feel uncomfortable, kind of like pressure, kind of like you have to pee, but it shouldn't hurt.
Okay.
Okay? If you have any really bad pain tonight, you have to call us. Okay? Then when you come back tomorrow for the second part of the procedure, for that part, you're gonna be asleep. Okay, and I can be with you then too.
I'm gonna like go under?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Just for about 10 minutes. It's pretty quick, all right?
Okay.
And then when you wake up, you'll be in the recovery room, you're gonna be all done. And you could go home.
Okay.
All right. Are you ready?
I think so.
Okay.
When it came to preparing for this scene, I spent a lot of time reflecting on my own memories and experiences as a young woman, which can be difficult and sometimes rather hard to think about. And when I thought about this scene, I thought, this is somebody who's finally making herself vulnerable and feels safe enough to do so. And, so tapping into my own places and experiences and getting into that headspace was important. And working with the social worker, who was a real social worker, made me feel comfortable enough to dive into that place and to really let my own experiences inform the scene.
Basically, I did a counseling session. I did a counseling session like I've done, I think I've seen like somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15 to 20,000 women in like the decade that I was doing abortion counseling. So I've had this conversation many, many, many times. So I just had to have the conversation. I just had to put myself in that headspace and do what I do. There was the piece of the script where she didn't want me to go off script at all. And that's, specifically when we get to the Likert scale, there were specific responses that she wanted me to give.
The day that we shot the scene, I made sure that Sidney had a space to sit away from the commotion of the production, a quiet office. And she sat in there for a long time and she read the scene several times. And I remember right before we shot, I came in and I told her, I said, don't worry about the character's medical history. You can just answer as yourself, because the beginning of the scene just begins with a lot of medical information, medical history. And there was something about Sidney starting from a very personal place, speaking about her own life, her own history, that allowed for her to dig much deeper in the more sort of emotional and heightened section of the scene. I chose to shoot the scene very simply. I wanted the camera to be very still in front of her and static. And I wanted it almost to be like a mirror for the character. And I wanted it to feel a little like an interrogation. And it was important for me that the audience sit through the entire scene, like in a long take, and for it to play out in a durational sense, because I wanted them to experience what it's like to really sit in one of those offices. And particularly, I wanted to bring a male audience into such an intimate experience.
To film this scene, for me, it was really powerful. It felt amazing to be able to harness my own experiences and emotions from maybe my past or even just what I was dealing with in the present, and considering what Autumn had gone through and harnessing all of that to create a moment that so many people have connected with and were moved by. And I remember, I believe I said that I felt cathartic afterwards, and it just felt like so much energy had left my body, and I felt just so alive.
Eliza said, as we're going through the casting process, I just keep hearing your voice in my head. and I would really love for you to do it. And my initial reaction was like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. Like, are there going to be like cue cards or something? Like, I have no idea about how any of this works. But she said, no, I just want you to be yourself. I want you to do what you've done a million times before and just have the conversation that you've had so many times before. So she wasn't asking me to be anyone other than who I am. So I completely trusted her. I completely trusted Eliza. I don't know that I would have said yes and been involved in that capacity with just anyone. But I knew from my, previous conversations and interactions with her that this was going to be a project that I would be very happy to have my name and my professional reputation attached to.
I remember in the moment shooting that scene that it felt very powerful to me personally. Just the experience of shooting it was intense. I had hopes that other people would think the same. And, seeing now that they have, it's really validating, and it feels really good.
I wanted the audience to understand the depth of her trauma and how much pain she's carrying around with her, and how the situation of having to travel and to do it all on her own, like how much trauma that can add for a real person in this country who's navigating similar situations.